Hey everyone, welcome back. Okay, I want to talk about something that on this whole awakening journey. Now, there's a lot of healthcare people and other people that follow along with the show, and they got sucked in during like the dumb parody videos and then COVID, and now they're here because they're like, what's he talking about? That I can actually see reality as it is, that there's a possible end to suffering in this lifetime, that I can understand my mind and my reactivity and my conditioning and start to let it go and see what's actually right in front of all of our faces. Like, he's been talking about that, so I'm weirdly interested and I don't know why. But yet, when I go online and I watch videos about this stuff, everybody seems to be saying a different thing that doesn't vibe with my own experience. And I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm broken. Maybe my own experience is wrong. Maybe I can't trust what's coming up for me because Zubin's saying one thing about awakening and non-duality and everything is one and this and that and it's all empty of substance. And Angelo DeLullo is saying another thing and Rupert Spira is saying this thing and the Sufi mystics are saying this thing and my Christian upbringing is telling me this. And I don't know what to believe because what's coming up here feels different. And then they talk about these stages of awakening. Like, well, first you have this insight shift, then you have this first awakening, then you have this shadow work, then you have this increasing emptiness and deconstruction, and then it's all empty, and then it's all full, and then you let it go. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's not my experience. Or worse, oh, that's what my experience is supposed to be? Let me see if I can go seek that. Why am I not having stage 5 of whatever this Vipassana map is telling me I should have? And people start to really get frustrated, or worse, they start having strong experiences that don't fit in these models. And then they wonder what's going on. They almost have a spiritual crisis. Like there's something wrong with me because they're talking about everything being empty of substance and this radiance, but all I feel is unconditional divine love, like God. So what's wrong with me? Or I'm having all this unconscious stuff, like entities speaking to me, like ancestors speaking to me, or the trees are telling me how to be. And what is that? Am I just crazy? And these Buddhist guys are telling me, oh yeah, that's all just illusion. It's just more empty stuff. Just forget it. And the Christians are telling me, no, just forget all that. It's all about Christ consciousness and God's love. and on and on and on and on. And by the end, you're just going, oh God, you know what? I'm just going to go back to being fast asleep. At least it's predictable because I'm creating the world with concepts and beliefs and it's in complicity with society. I'm getting along just fine. Sure, I'm miserable at the deepest level. Sure, I'm suffering. Sure, I'm afraid of death. Sure, all these things. But you know what? It's better than just not knowing what the fuck is going on at any given minute, right? So that's what I want to talk about today. Are there really stages of awakening? What are these maps? And I want to use something that I recently was turned on to by a friend, Dr. Pierce Salguero. I hope I'm saying that right. He is a professor at Penn State, teaches Asian history, history of medicine, history of these Asian cultural aspects like healing, shamanism, those kind of things. I'm probably not doing him justice, but he's gone through this journey and has this really interesting take on it. He talks about how everything is a model when we try to use the mind to explain it. So that's why these sort of Buddhist models say, oh, you have stage this and stage this and stage this. It's one map of a territory, just like a globe is a map of the world or a flat map or a different type of projection. They all try to depict a truth, but they're only a projection. They're only a depiction. And so as such, they always have a distortion. They always are incomplete in some way. And the same is true of any spiritual map of awakening, of unfolding, of realization, of seeing truth. They all come from a certain angle. They're all depicting the territory, but they're doing it in very different ways. And so what Pierce talks about is, you know, in the classic teachings, like say Buddhism and all that, there's all these different locations of unfolding awakening. And Angelo and others have talked about some of these. There's like this, you know, stage of emptiness and this stage of non-dual realization and this stage of then no self-realization and so on. And all of that can be completely valid if that's how it's going for you. In other words, if it's a good map of the actual territory for you. But here's the thing. Every single one of us is absolutely unique. We have different genetics. We have different ancestral sort of karma. We have different causes and conditions in our life. We have different traumas. We have different personalities. We have different cultural influences. We have different physical and biological components to us. We have different biopsychosocial makeup. So how we experience reality and the ultimate one truth, because there is only one deepest reality, but it shows up in a myriad of facets, like facets of a diamond. How we experience it is very unique to us. And it can only be experienced by us in that way, in that unique configuration. So a map that might work really well for a spiritual athlete, someone like a Ramana Maharshi or a Nisargadatta or a Delulu or someone like that. And again, I'm just being general and vague here. Angelo's map is very actually complex and I can't know it myself, right? But like what works for them might not work for you because you're showing up in a completely different way. And this is where another model can be applied. Now, it's just a different model. It's Pierce Salguero's model. And it's the model of threads. Instead of locations, what if everybody's unfolding followed certain threads, and some people follow a single thread because they're a spiritual athlete in emptiness, in deconstructing reality into the fact that it's absolutely devoid of any substance or inherent nature, any permanence, and that thread can be followed all the way down into absolute emptiness, where even perception itself, even consciousness itself disappears, and there's just. And that thread is actually very common in sort of Eastern religions. So Buddhism, Taoism, Vedantic Hinduism, many of them follow this thread and sort of advocate it and say anything that is experienced outside of that, like love, pure love or divinity, or the unconscious stuff that comes up, or energy, like the energetics of the body, that's all fine. It's just another empty appearance. But so a spiritual athlete on that thread might just follow it all the way down to pure emptiness and find that those are the experiences they have. And that may be how it goes for them, but it may not be how it goes for you. For you, for example, let's take one thread. Emptiness, right? So that thread says you can deconstruct reality, and the first shift that happens on that thread is realizing, oh, I'm not this body, and everything around me that I thought was solid is actually a conceptual overlay. Tree is not a tree. Tree is that sensory perception, which is not describable. And then the next shift on that thread might be, oh, even the senses are made up of this like complete, empty, substanceless isness. And then even that can unfold into even the perception is empty, and there can actually be an experience of no perception. And consciousness itself that you thought, now, oh, I'm not the body and I'm not all this, I'm consciousness. Even that is seen as made up of the same pixelated no thing. And then you can have a complete cessation of all of that. And that each level of insight can happen at any time. They can overlap. There can be a wave where it goes out. You have a peak glimpse experience and then it comes back. And so some people follow that thread very religiously. And then you go watch non-dual videos and stuff and you're like, oh yeah, that's my experience. Great. But what about someone who doesn't have that experience or has some of it, but then suddenly has a different thread or is very heavy on a different thread, which is, say, the love thread. And this is just a word, right, to describe this sense of connectivity, of unity. So the love thread might be the first experience you have is a deep heart opening where suddenly you feel a connection to everyone. You feel love for all beings. And maybe that then evolves into, no, it's even deeper than that. It's more refined than that. It's a connection with everything. Even non-living things feel like me. There's no separation. And that refines even further to, oh, it even feels like even that dissolves into a divine light, like a luminance of connectivity and love. And then that even goes into, there is no separation anywhere. Everything is perfect oneness. So how do you reconcile the love thread, which is real? You're having that experience. Right? How can you deny your experience? With the emptiness thread, which is even that experience of love is just emptiness. It's just empty phenomena. It's just another appearance and, other impermanent appearance. So how are those reconciled? Well, then what happens when a third common thread, and I'm just listing the most common threads in experience and the threads that I've had in my own experience, energetics. So, I actually had my first shift was this feeling of the whole body was a radiant energy, and energy was coming from the base of the spine out through the top of the head or through the heart, and just huge sense that the body is not solid at all, but rather it's this energetic flux. And that continues to refine in that, no, actually everything around me is energy, like the matrix. It's just, and just having these kundalini, that's another word. It's a esoteric word for the feeling of energy in the body and sometimes outside of the body. And that keeps refining until the body is felt to just be a field of light and everything is just pulsating energy. Well, how do I reconcile that with everything is emptiness or everything is love? When these teachers on YouTube are talking about everything is love and they're talking about devotion and praying and chanting, and these teachers are talking about everything is empty. Forget all that. It's all illusion. It's all this empty, radiant, unborn. And I'm like, everything's energy. The Reiki people are talking about it, and the Qigong people are talking about it, and the Qi and the prana and the flow of the inner winds and all this. And it's like, what? And then there's another thread, which is, wait, what about the unconscious? What about all these inner children that keep coming up and this trauma that I've had that is now showing up, that was repressed before and is showing up in awareness as these real experiences, real children, entities sometimes, like ancestors and spirits and ghosts, and the sort of almost psychic realm of things, which is really just the unconscious repressed material coming up, and it goes really deep. And it feels like when that comes up, first you start feeling these very superficial traumas, then you go even deeper, then you go to memories that you didn't know you had, like birth trauma, and then you're going into past lives and you're going into ancestor memories and these really indescribable things, ultimately down to something that seems cohesive, like, they all start to integrate, and then it feels like there's one soul. You start talking about the soul, this thing which the emptiness thread would be like, what? There's no soul. The love thread would be like, it's all God. It's all love. There's no soul. The energy thread would be like, there's no soul. It's just energy. And yet on this thread, it feels like, no, all these inner children, all this trauma, all this unconscious had to be integrated. Now, each person may experience only one of those threads, or they may experience each thread at a different time, or intertwining threads, like an energy thread might open into the realization of emptiness, or the realization of divine love, or God consciousness, Christ consciousness, complete surrender. And so now with the thread model, it's like, why are we talking about stages and I'm stage this, stage that, when my experience is, no, love is showing up, or unconscious material is arising, or, it is deconstructed into emptiness, or, oh man, the energetics in the body and on retreat are crazy, and they all start to merge. So this is another map. It doesn't represent the territory perfectly, but it is another map that allows you to trust your unique experience at any given time and realize it's all lawful. It's all okay. You're not broken. That teacher that says that is not important, that's fine for them to say that, because in their experience, that's true. They're on this thread right now. But in your experience, no, this is what's happening. Love is showing up, or the unconscious is showing up, energy is showing up. So what's beautiful is the way Peter talks about it is each of the threads has its fundamental question. So it's not about stages. It's about just deepening each thread, because there is an end of the thread where there's ultimate unity. And then there's an end where all the threads come together and they're seen to be coherent. Initially, it's a paradox. It's like, oh, how can these be? They're saying opposite things, and yet they feel correct. They feel both right. And then that's seen to be, nope, they're not two at all. And then it's just seen like, yeah, who cares? It's all exactly this. That's the end of all of this, right? And then it's just life. So the spiritual journey is a deepening of each of these threads, one or more, and often crossing each other in these intricate kind of tapestries. And it's beautiful, and it's your tapestry, no one else's, yours. And it's all pointing at truth, non-dual truth, oneness, all of it, all in different ways. Every religion, every spiritual tradition, every practice focuses more on a particular thread and may deny a little bit the others or say, yeah, that happens, but it's not as important. But for you, what's important for you? So now you can see all these YouTube clowns and go, yeah, they've got that thread and they've got that thread. But you know what? What's resonating with me right now is divine love, is oneness. Or what's resonating with me right now is this, whoa, this indescribable energetic that keeps getting more and more refined and more subtle. And the body is just this experience of light. And for each thread, there's a question that you can ask to further the deepening, a kind of inquiry. Like, for example, for the emptiness thread of awakening, you can ask this question: what is it that's still here that feels real? So if you're deconstructing reality into its empty substrate, into this unborn isness, and even beyond to just the indescribable, at any stage you could say, okay, what is it in my experience that still feels real and solid? And you can look there and you can realize that as this thread evolves, that will go. And then you go to the next thing. Okay, what? Oh, now everything is consciousness. It's all this empty consciousness. Okay, well, now that feels real. So look at that. Could that dissolve? So that's the emptiness thread. And you ask the question, what still feels real? What still feels solid? What still feels here and present? Can that be deconstructed and let go? For the love thread, you could ask the question, what's here in my experience now that makes things feel separate or seems in opposition to unconditional love for everything? And you can go, oh man, I'm really mad at this guy. Ooh, okay. Let's feel into that. So what is it? The sense that I'm apart from them, the sense that we're in conflict in some way. And that thread can continue to refine and deepen. For the energy thread, you could ask the question, what is it here that still feels solid, that doesn't feel dynamic and in motion, constantly in flux? So you can feel like, oh, the body feels like energy, but this table feels solid, feels static. So you know as that thread evolves, that table is going to start to look like it does in the Matrix, just vibrating, oscillating, condensed energy. In the unconscious thread, you could ask the question, what is it here that hasn't been allowed, that hasn't been felt in consciousness fully, that hasn't been liberated? What inner trauma, what inner child, what inner ancestor, what inner experience hasn't been allowed into the light of awareness, hasn't integrated into the one soul? And you could ask that question, and you know at some point it's going to come. And so you can attune in a way. So in a sense, it's a beautiful model that validates the experience you're having. By the way, those 4 threads are only the most common. So there's probably an infinite number of threads. So whatever you're experiencing is right. It is right. What a relief. That's the good news. There's so many people who are banging their head against the wall going, I'm not having stage 3 awakening. I haven't had non-dual perception. I haven't experienced emptiness. I haven't had a mind-blowing Kundalini experience. I don't feel like everything is love. That's fine. It's okay. You're perfect. This goes as it goes for you. And just knowing this I know it did for me, and I know it did for the friend who turned me on to this. It can create an opening. It can dissolve a resistance pattern to what's actually happening for you. And then you start to go back and realize, because it's often seen in retrospect, this has been happening the whole time. All these threads have been showing up in different ways and then intertwining. And I've been having peek glimpses of further down a thread, and then maybe retreating back to normal experience and going, oh, what was that? I want that back. And then slowly working down the thread again. And again, you're not doing any of this. It's just kind of happening. But seeing it with a map and a model that may be more faithful to your own experience can sometimes be helpful. Doesn't mean that the Buddhist maps aren't right or the Christian maps aren't right for you. They might be right for you. It might be the perfect thing for you. Or for the spiritual athlete, just going down the devotion love thread all the way to the end. Or the energy worker who's just an adept. They were born as an adept in energy. They see everything as energy. Well, why would you tell them it's all empty, or it's all love, or you haven't done your shadow work? It's absurd. And I think it causes so much harm to people that they start just feeling like they're broken. And nothing's broken, right? That's the love thread. Everything is perfect. And then I'd say it's also empty. And it's also all energetics. It's all just flux of energy. And man, you better look down at what you're repressing, because that repressed material may be keeping you from going down these other threads into completeness, into wholeness, into oneness, which is ultimately the end of all of this. The threads cohere, they come together, and then they're seen to all be, whoops, it was all the same thing. Different facets of the diamond. It's all the same beautiful translucent carbon in the end. And so we can take a deep breath and go, okay, whatever's showing up in my YouTube feed is what I need to see in that moment. And if it doesn't resonate, I let it go. Whatever retreat I find myself at, that's where I'm supposed to be. And if it feels like I'm pushing and it's no longer a fit, let that go. And the next thing will show up. So I can just tell you this from my own experience. And Pierce has talked about his experience, which was beautiful. This was my experience with the threads. So this started back in 2012. I moved to Vegas, and I had this experience in a closet with Tony Hsieh and Sarah the sorceress, where I realized for the first time that I wasn't my story, that past and future didn't exist. They were thoughts, and that all that existed was this present moment as awareness. And that was my first big insight. And that, you could say, was on the emptiness thread. It was saying, what you thought was this is that can actually be deconstructed into something where you're like, oh, no, it was actually just awake presence that was living this life, and the huge relief that comes with that. But it didn't feel like divine love. It didn't feel like energy. It didn't feel like there was unconscious material. It was just like, what a relief. I'm not what I thought I was. Identity shift. And then regression back into ego. And then, and then as that went on, I would have these weird energetic experiences that I couldn't understand. And when I would read Vipassana texts about it, they would say, yeah, you get these energies, don't get fixated on them. They're really nothing, really focus back on the breath or on whatever you're doing. And I was like, but they feel kind of like there's something I should surrender to there. I shouldn't ignore them. I feel like I want to surrender to them, but these maps are telling me I shouldn't. So then later, when I did surrender to them, I go to my first retreat with Angelo, and I woke up in the middle of the night with this like substernal, like chest pressure, and it was this energetic knot. And I thought, oh man, am I having a heart attack? And I sit in a chair, and I'd been listening to people's stories during the speaking part of the retreat, and they were all stories of their trauma and their suffering, and it just felt like my heart was going to break. And so I sit in the chair at 2 a.m., and suddenly I feel all this energy and light come through the ground, up through my body, through my spine, out my chest. And it feels like a blinding light that's made of just pure energy and pure love. So it was an energetic thread and a heart love thread opening entirely. If you would have talked to me about emptiness or the unconscious, I would have been totally perplexed. And it just felt like my heart blew open, and I had just this beautiful sense of love for all beings. And that sort of opened up this whole thing for weeks afterwards. I would go to Whole Foods and I'd see the guy handing out the pizza, and I felt like he was me, like there was no separation. It was pure love. and family and strangers and everything, walking around talking like you've been, smoking weed. And then I go to another retreat where suddenly the insight is everything is pure consciousness and everything's happening in that. And there's no beings, there's no objects, there's just awakeness, presence, consciousness, and everything arising in it. I'm like, what the hell is this? Thinking, okay, oh yeah, Angela's talked about this. This is unbound consciousness. Okay, this is stage whatever. And then really fixating on that. And then all the love and the energy and the unconscious stuff just kind of recedes. Or worse, there's a rejection of it. It's like, well, that can't be right because this is what's right. And then the next retreat, diving even deeper into emptiness. Oh my God, even perception itself dissolves. And then another retreat where the unconscious is showing up in every possible way. Childhood experiences, hurts, wounds, emotions that I can't explain, where the whole retreat you're on the ground, or in the floor of the shower just weeping and crying and going, what the hell is this? I'm totally going crazy. And then trying to rationalize and go, it's all empty. It's all just awareness. No. It's all love. It's all love. No, it doesn't feel like love. It feels like hatred and anger and hurt. So the threads show up when and how they show up for you alone. This is your unfolding. This is your hero's journey. And at the end, you see, it wasn't even you, it was this indescribability. And it's all perfect. So, relax. You're not broken. If stages are helpful for you, great. If you're one of those people who's into the radical non-duality speakers who say nothing's ever happened, everything's a story, you don't exist, shut the fuck up and just notice it, and why are we even talking about it? Great. If you're one person who feels so embodied, whose spirituality is based in love and connection, beautiful. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. They're all following the threads that are laid out. And that's a fucking relief, isn't it? So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I don't know if I'll put this out. Sometimes I make these things and I peek back and I'm like, garbage. So we'll see. If I do put it out and you do find it useful, hit like and comment, because it helps the algorithm to share it to people whose thread is showing up to watch this video and they need this. So you can be a part of that intertwined thing. I mean, you have no choice. You'll do what you do. All right, gang, I love you. Pierce Salguero, I think he has a website. His last name, I'll put the link in the description. And I've reached out to him as well by email. So hopefully at some point we can have him on the show. I love you guys, and we are out. Peace.